If you're thinking about a move to Cincinnati, excellent, but listen closely because while the city looks amazing on paper, if you choose the wrong neighborhood or if you overlook key details, it might end up costing you a ton of money. It might mess up your commute on a daily basis, costing tons of frustration. And there are so many things that can leave you frustrated with your daily life. We don't want that to happen. That's why in this video, we're covering the 12 things most people get wrong about living in Cincinnati. We're gonna look at things like the cost of living versus local wages and what people don't expect. There's the hidden lifestyle deal breakers like unpredictable weather and the allergy season that can really get you. And then there's the block-to-block differences that impact school ratings and safety and even flooding risk. So hey guys, if you're new here, my name is Eric with Team Sztanyo. I'm the team lead here. I'm a local real estate agent, and also I've grown up here. I've lived here for over, 37 years now. So I understand the ins and outs of Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky very, very well. And every week, my team is helping families and professionals and relocating buyers move to the Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky area with confidence so you don't end up wasting your money or live in the wrong spot. So let's jump right in and first talk about the cost of living versus wage realities. First of all, the good news. The cost of living here in Cincinnati is pretty significantly lower than a lot of areas around the nation. But wages in many industries, especially service, healthcare, and education, aren't always keeping pace with the national averages. And that gap can definitely make that affordability feel a lot tighter than what you expected as a newcomer to the area. So let's take a look at some of the numbers. First of all, housing affordability. Cincinnati's median sale price is about 37% lower than the national average. It's around $292,000 right now versus $435,000 nationally. That definitely makes homeownership feel within reach, especially compared to coastal areas or the Sun Belt. Let's take a look at property taxes. Ohio's effective property tax is 1.31%. Now, that is a little bit higher than the national average of 1.1%, but it's still lower than states like New Jersey or Illinois. The median property tax bills were about $2,530 in 2023. That's up about 23% since 2019. And that's on the Ohio side. If you move over to the Northern Kentucky side, you're going to find even lower property taxes than typically what you find in Ohio. So let's talk wage gaps. Now, the median household income in Cincinnati is $72,000. And you can compare that to cities like Chicago, which is $90,000, or Washington, D.C., which is actually $110,000. Service and education salaries tend to lag behind it here, while corporate roles do offer stronger compensation. So what are some of those corporate anchors here in Cincinnati? We have several Fortune 500 and even Fortune 100 companies. So employers like Procter & Gamble and Kroger and Fifth Third Bank and GE Aviation. These often provide higher paying jobs, especially in tech, corporate, and executive roles. And what I'm seeing, especially in the last few years, is we are seeing a lot of growth here locally, especially in these industries of advanced manufacturing, life sciences, supply chain management, and logistics. So businesses like GE Aviation right now are booming, and there's a lot of fallout to other businesses that help support that as well. And if you have a job in that space or in those surrounding businesses that's a little bit higher paying, you can really take advantage of the lower cost of living here in Cincinnati. And lastly, there are some neighborhood trade-offs. So on the outskirts, you might look at some neighborhoods and say, those are really affordable, but they might not have the best rated schools. They might not have easy access to healthcare or all of the lifestyle amenities you're looking for. So don't be surprised if some of the lower cost neighborhoods aren't giving you just everything you want in a place to live. All right, so how can you counterbalance all this? My advice would be to secure a job or know where your income levels are going to be before you make the move. That way, you know that the affordability, the lower cost of living that is here in Cincinnati is going to make sense for your lifestyle, and it's going to make the move worth it when you come. All right, next up is this potential problem of fragmented neighborhood vibes. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, Cincinnati itself, the actual city limits, has 52 different neighborhoods. And if you expand that out to kind of the greater Cincinnati region, you're really looking at over 70 different neighborhoods. And that can feel very differently depending on where you're at. You could have different schools, you could have different lifestyle and incomes and school quality and commute times and safety. Like all these things can be very different Now, one of these divides you're going to feel when you're moving to Cincinnati is this east side versus west side divide, and it's kind of real. Neighborhoods on the east side of town tend to have a higher median income per household, and the school districts often are more highly rated than some of the schools on the west side. And what you're going to typically find on the west side is the housing prices are more modest. There may be more of a mixed stock of housing on that west side. There's probably a stronger sense of tradition and community on the west side as well. So if you're on the Ohio side and you're thinking west side or east side, if school districts don't matter as much to you, you can find some great houses on the west side, Cheviot areas like this, where the price per square foot is a lot lower than the east side. So that's just something you might want to consider if you're looking between the two areas. Another thing you need to factor in with these different neighborhoods is safety, education, and just the fact that some of these neighborhoods are going to feel different. And obviously this is going to impact different neighborhood resources. These things tend to cluster much more heavily in some neighborhoods versus others here in Cincinnati. And overall, the east side is probably going to have more boutique shops, more upscale dining, things like that on the east side of town. Now, along with this, some neighborhoods are going to feel a little bit more connected while others feel more isolated. And one other heads up is that you should expect locals to kind of identify pretty strongly with their side, right? Whether that's east side or west side or even northern Kentucky. And a lot of that has to do with the history, where they grew up, where they went to school. All right, so if you're looking to move here and you're thinking about all these different neighborhoods and factors, that can seem a little bit overwhelming. So what is the smart thing to do here? Well, I recommend a few ideas. Number one, try to visit here multiple times, right? You want to get a feel for these different neighborhoods. It's always best if you possibly can, before you buy, come and visit, drive around town, get to know the feel of the east side, of the west side, of these different pockets of the different neighborhoods. And if you can, try to visit these areas at different times of the day so you can get an idea of commute time during rush hour, or you can get an idea of what is the nightlife like when people are actually coming downtown, because it's going to feel different at different times. I'd also recommend that you narrow down your search based on your priorities. So if you want more walkable, if you want more of an urban lifestyle or that nightlife, well, okay, we can narrow that down to some certain neighborhoods and communities. But on the other hand, if you're looking for more of that suburban lifestyle and you're like, no, I want top-rated schools, I want really safe neighborhoods, okay, then it's like, great, we can narrow down those neighborhoods as well. And so now you're not so overwhelmed by all of the different neighborhoods. Another really important here when you're looking to invest in a house and purchase a house is trying to understand where's the local development going so that you know that your house is going to appreciate, you know that you're in a good spot for where the growth is. We've done some videos about what is happening from a development standpoint so you can understand what is going on and how that's going to impact the appreciation of your home. Highly recommend you check those out. So you definitely want to factor in that long-term appreciation that comes with the development. And the last idea I would probably say is you might want to consider moving here and renting, whether that's for a month, 3 months, 6 months, even a year, just so you can get a better feel of all these neighborhoods before you decide on what's best for you. All right, the next problem we need to address here is that Midwesterners, hey, we're friendly, but that does not always equal immediate insider access. So here's the thing, when you come and visit, when you move here, you're gonna find out really fast, people are friendly. I always have a fun time when people from New York are coming here because they feel a little creeped out, a little weirded out. They're like, what are you trying to get from me? What are you trying to pull up? Like, the skepticism level is always much higher from New Yorkers. And I love that. I appreciate that in you. But you're going to get smiles. You're going to get friendly waves. You're going to get small talk. You're going to get helpfulness here. But that doesn't always mean you're instantly invited into the deeper inner circles of friendship. That's probably going to take a little bit more time. So you just need to be aware of that because a lot of people here grew up here, right? So they have decades of social ties between family and school and church or other local circles, local connections. And that's hard to break into immediately if you're moving here. So it's not uncommon for newcomers to kind of feel included, at least at a surface level when they move here, but not like really in yet. And that just takes a little bit of time. But I would just say that it's worth it. Like, go for it. Do what you have to do to break in, because when you have that support system here, especially let's say you're not around your family, you can actually get that from the neighbors, from the people who are living in this area. So what are some tips to maybe help this part of your transition go a little bit smoother? Number one, I think just knowing about this, knowing that it's going to take a little bit of time is probably a really helpful first step. Number two, I would say, is be proactive. So, volunteer, join local clubs, engage in a church. You're going to meet people and make those relationships a lot faster if you're out there doing the thing and being proactive about it. Number three, I would say, is be visible and try to say yes to as many things as possible, even if it's an invite to something that's maybe not in your wheelhouse or, something you wouldn't normally do. Try to say yes to as many things as possible to meet more people and that might lead to better and quicker friendships. And number 4, kind of a side route here, is maybe seek out other transplants or newcomers to the area. They're going to kind of know what you're going through as well, and you might be able to click just over the fact that you've got that common bond of like, hey, we're new here, we're not in the insiders group yet, let's be friends. So that can be a really good thing too. All right, next up on the list is the weather whiplash that can occur. Now, one thing that's great about Cincinnati is you get all 4 seasons. So if you've been in a place where you don't get that, a lot of people who move here, they're like, I'm actually really looking forward to winter. We don't have winter here. That would be really nice. So let's just kind of work through each season so you have a general idea of what the weather's going to be like here. Summers in Cincinnati are typically warm to hot with high humidity. The average summer highs are typically reaching in the mid 80s, and nights can definitely stay warm and muggy. The city's climate classification is humid subtropical or transitional, which means relatively high moisture in the summer and no completely dry season. All right, on the flip side is the winter, and the winters can be cold, they can be gray, they can be wet. Oftentimes we'll get even more ice than snow, it just depends. Winter average highs are around 44 degrees Fahrenheit, and lows can dip to the upper 20s. Snowfall is pretty moderate here. It's about 15 inches a year, so there's probably like 2 to 4 times a year where we will get 1 to 2 inches. And then there's probably, 1 to 2 to 3 times a year where we might get 4 to 6 inches or more, somewhere around that. More often than snow, we're not getting those big lake effects like you see in Chicago or Cleveland or Detroit or Buffalo or anything like that. Oftentimes, precipitation in the winter can be more like rain or potentially a sleet mix, especially in those late fall months and early spring, you'll see more of that. All right, fall is gorgeous, but it can be a little bit shorter than what we actually want here. You're going to get those crisp nights. You're going to see the leaves churning. You're going to have high school football going on. I love fall here. I think September and October are definitely some of the best months for weather here in the Cincinnati area. You're going to get those colorful leaves and mild temperatures. Highs are usually in the 60 to 70 degrees, with cooler nights probably being in the 50s to upper 40s. The foliage is probably going to be most vibrant in October, but again, fall can always seem to last a little bit too short as it transitions into winter. And as sad and as gray as winter can be, spring is awesome. I love spring here. It can be very wet, but everything's warming up, and with all that moisture, with all that rain, you've been living in the gray and kind of the brown of all the trees over the last several months, and then all of a sudden, boom, you get these buds of life that come. Everything starts turning green, everything starts flowering. It's really exciting. Honestly, I love spring here in Cincinnati. It fills me with hope every single year. Now, the big downside to spring is the pollen, the allergies. They can totally come after you. That's been an overview of the seasons, but what you might not expect are these sudden weather swings and kind of these unpredictable transitions. And let's talk for a minute about how that will impact you from a real estate standpoint, because we've got a lot of basements here locally too, and we've also got a wide range of when these houses were built. So you've got a lot of different basement types. And with these various weather swings, that means a lot of things can happen with the humidity of your house. A lot of things can happen in terms of moisture and water getting into your basement. And that can cause a lot of problems when it comes to your house, when it comes to the inspection period in your house. These are items that's really helpful to have a local experienced real estate agent on your side who understands what's going on with that house, what's going on with the foundation, how's the rain going to impact that over time. Really important for you as you're choosing where to live and what home to live. So from a personal standpoint, budgeting for layering is probably a really good idea. Make sure you understand your wardrobe and the different seasons where you can layer clothes. But from your house perspective, there's a lot going on. All right, next up are the public transportation gaps. And here's the truth. If you're living in Cincinnati and you don't have a car, it can be really difficult to get around town, especially if you're not living in that downtown area. Buses, the streetcar, park and rides, for example, they do exist, but many suburbs and areas across state lines, Northern Kentucky, for example, have limited or no good transit connections. So what do we have here locally in terms of public transit? Well, we do have that Cincinnati streetcar, or it's called the Cincinnati Connector, and it runs a 3.6-mile loop with 18 different stations. It's going to be connecting the banks, downtown, and over the Rhine, but it's really just kind of locked down into that one spot. So it's great if you're downtown or in the banks or over the Rhine, but beyond that, it's never really extended to uptown or beyond. And in terms of the bus, I actually think it's a pretty good system both on the Ohio side and the Kentucky side. There are plenty of different routes to choose from, but as it gets out into the suburbs, coverage definitely thins in terms of where you can get on the bus and the different routes that it covers. Overall, Cincinnati has fewer rapid transit, rail, or frequent high-capacity transit options compared to many larger U.S. metros. The connector streetcar is nice for the core, but it doesn't replace a full transit network. Bus frequency is pretty good, but it does kind of drop off in many residential zones. Sorta does have 49 fixed bus routes and 3,600 steps, and that's meaningful, but many are local or slow rather than frequent or fast. All right, so what does this mean for you? Well, if you are moving somewhere out of downtown or at least a well-served suburb, you need to plan for having a car. That's just kind of how it is around here. Otherwise, you need to know the bus routes really well, unless there's a very reliable bus route that you can depend on. Again, if possible, I would say test it out, test out your commute. If you're gonna use the bus, test that out. If you're gonna do the park and ride, test that out. Get to know that feel before you end up buying a house or choose a neighborhood based on the different public options that are available. Again, if you're not going to have that car, make sure you're picking a location not just for your commute, but that's also going to have the shopping and the restaurants and the other lifestyle amenities that you want nearby in a walkable distance. Okay, we've been talking about transportation, so obviously let's talk about traffic bottlenecks now. Now, the interstate system is going to bottleneck every single day, especially along where the bridges cross the river. So where I-71 and I-75 merge together, they come together on this bridge called the Brent Spence Bridge, and that can definitely have some traffic bottlenecks on both sides of the river every single day, especially during rush hour times. Now, this Brent Spence Bridge congestion, this corridor is one of the worst truck bottlenecks in the United States, with average speeds during peak hours around 33.6 miles per hour versus the 55 mile per hour posted limit. The fact is, there's just overloaded capacity on this bridge. This bridge was designed for 80,000 vehicles a day, but it now carries double that, around 160,000 vehicles per day. So rush hour is bad, but event traffic can also be really bad. The Reds, the Bengals, and downtown concerts can all funnel thousands of extra vehicles into Fort Washington Way and river crossings, compounding this gridlock. And Fort Washington Way's design, which has narrow ramps and these mergers, further contributes to this problem downtown. All right, so what should you do? Number one, definitely test your commute, especially at those rush hour times. Number two, if you can, adjust your work hours or your routes home to avoid the peak delays. Number three, I would say get to love these alternative routes. And number four, realize that, look, they're building a Brent Spence Bridge companion. That project is going to last into the 2030s. So that could be a headache for years to come. But on the plus side, when that's finished, that should ease a lot of this congestion. In the short term, however, everyone I'm talking to who's moving here, I'm like, hey, where are you working? Do you have a commute every day? Because this is going to be an issue for years to come. Let's try to choose a neighborhood where you can avoid all these heavy traffic delays. Next up, let's talk about safety, because crime patterns do vary widely within the Cincinnati area. Cincinnati's safety depends a lot on which neighborhood you're in. Some areas like Over the Rhine, West End, and Avondale have much higher crime rates, including violent crime, while suburbs like Mason or Loveland are much, much safer. So in Cincinnati overall, the chance of being a victim of violent crime is about 1 in 137. And for property crime, it's about 1 in 23. Over the Rhine does stand out. It has a high crime rate, around 70 crimes per 1,000 residents in a typical year. And it's ranked very low on safety compared to other neighborhoods. Recent crime data in 2024 shows reported crime in Cincinnati decreased around 4.7% from 2023. However, some neighborhoods saw more incidents than others. Westwood, for example, had 2,677 reported crimes. Avondale had about 1,505, and East Price Hill around 1,493. Shootings and violent crimes are down somewhat citywide. Between January and July of 2024 versus the same period in 2023, there were 172 shooting incidents this year versus 187 the previous year, and homicides have slightly decreased. There's 39 versus 41 the same period. Additionally, police response times vary by district and are changing. After closing District 5 headquarters, Cincinnati Police Department reported that response times improved citywide by about 3.5 minutes on average. But in some cases, data shows regressions or slower response times in specific districts versus others. Now, the type of crime obviously can differ. Property crime, which is burglary, theft, or auto theft, is much more common across many neighborhoods than violent crime. Some neighborhoods are hotspots for violent incidents, such as shootings or homicides. Neighborhoods with higher median incomes, better schools, more amenities, tend to also have lower crime rates and better policing, faster response times. So before you're choosing a neighborhood to live in, I highly recommend you check out the data. Check out the neighborhood crime maps. Check out if it's violent crime versus property crime and what is happening in the recent trends. Also see if the response time is available for that area or district. It depends on what you're looking for, but if you want safety, obviously you're going to want to prioritize those neighborhoods with lower crime rates, strong school systems, amenities, and a reputation for safety. You're probably going to want to budget for some home security awareness, whether that's alarms or lighting, especially in the areas that are showing moderate risk for crime. Lastly, I would say talk to the locals and see what the area, kind of feels like in the daytime versus the nighttime, if you're walking versus you're driving through. That way you can make your own decision on if that neighborhood feels right to you. We talked about this a little bit before, but I'm going to circle back to this idea of allergies and humidity. Look, there's no way getting around it. Cincinnati's climate can be rough for people who have allergies. Between spring pollen, summer stickiness, and moisture issues in older homes, there are multiple weather comfort challenges to consider. Now, Cincinnati actually is listed among better U.S. metros for seasonal allergies. For example, it's not in the worst tier, but many allergy reports still show spring and late summer as high pollen periods. And in one recent year, pollen counts spiked to around 3,450, with oak making up around 2,000 of that in April of 2023. Now, average humidity in summer months is fairly high, around 73% during summer. And that high humidity and warm temperatures, around the mid 80s, is going to make that heat feel more oppressive. Now, the muggy season, which are days when humidity plus temperature combine to feel uncomfortable, spans several months. WeatherSpark data shows about 18.2 muggy or worse days in July in Cincinnati. That's when you're usually going to feel it, in that July month. Relative humidity is not constant. Cincinnati has higher humidity in certain months and more moisture load, which can worsen mold in older homes or basements. For example, your average relative humidity in January is around 69%, and even in summer, it remains high enough that it's not noticeable. Now, rainfall, or the number of wet days, is frequent in summer. July has around 35 to 40% chance of a given day having precipitation, making things feel more humid and sticky. So what should you do? Well, prioritize homes that have good HVAC and dehumidifiers, and possibly upgraded ventilation in your basements of older homes. Use high-quality allergy filters and definitely change those often. Landscaping, be smart about it, right? There's going to be enough pollen in the air, so you might not want to put in a lot of trees that are going to create even more of a pollen problem. And you can plan for this. Use apps that are going to give you the pollen count. You can definitely buy some over-the-counter medication. That's typically what I do in the springtime. Is I just know, look, I'm probably going to take one of these allergy pills once a day for about 30 or 45 days. I get through the season, I can stop that itchy nose and those runny eyes. All right, next thing you need to know is that school quality definitely varies by district. Some school districts in the Cincinnati metro are top tier. You're going to get high grades, tons of great resources, and excellent outcomes. Others lag behind, or they're going to have schools that are mixed in quality. Boundaries, magnet programs, and whether you use public versus private options can really change what your child's education experience looks like. Let's look at one of those top tier school systems. Mason City School District is very highly rated. Mason has been rated A+ overall by Niche, with an overall grade of 4.24 out of 5. It's ranked number 2 of 607 in the best school districts in Ohio. In terms of academic proficiency, about 81% of students are proficient in math and 82% in reading. The graduation rate in the district is around 97%. Now, Mason serves a large and growing student body. There's around 10,000 or so students from PK through 12th grade. And the student-to-teacher ratio is solid at 22-1. Now, let's compare that to the Cincinnati Public Schools. CPS runs over 20 magnet schools and programs, including citywide magnets, which is open district-wide, and area magnets from East, West, and Central. Some magnet programs include Montessori, performing arts, world languages, and gifted or exceptional student programs. The magnet application is through a lottery, and there's some additional requirements for certain grades. Now, CPS is considering changes or redistricting that might alter magnet statuses of some schools, meaning what's available to a neighborhood can change. Also, whether you're in the East, Central, or West area, affects your magnet school neighborhood eligibility and transportation. Now, the districts that are highly rated, such as Mason, tend to have both higher home values and taxes in the associated neighborhoods. And buying into those districts does come at a premium. Now, on the Kentucky side, some of those top school districts that families love to get into are going to be Fort Thomas Independent Schools, Beechwood Independent Schools, Boone County Public Schools. I highly recommend that you check the test proficiency, the graduation rates, the advanced course offerings, such as the AP courses, and the student-to-teacher ratios. All right, a few tips here. Always verify the exact school boundary of a home you're looking to purchase in, because just because you're in the city name doesn't necessarily mean you're in the school district, the boundary line. Do your research and look at the recent state report cards and ratings, and do that for specific schools, not just the entire district. If public school options aren't ideal for you, you can definitely look into many private school options. There's also definitely a growing homeschool alternative here in the area and a lot of options to choose from on that end. The next thing to watch out for are those strong local identities and the different divides that can come from it. Now, Cincinnati takes pride in their neighborhoods and streets, their food, the schools, and even which side of town they live on. These identities can kind of fuel friendly rivalries, inside jokes, and sometimes can be a little bit of culture shock for newcomers. The east side is often associated with being a little bit more affluent, maybe a little bit more educated, typically white collars, what gets associated with the east side, whereas the west side might be a little bit more blue collar, might be associated a little bit more with these long-standing community ties. And these stereotypes have softened over time, and there are a lot of overlaps, but the narrative does still persist. People often characterize the east side as having more upscale housing, more suburban luxury, more exclusive amenities. West side places, I would say, have a little bit more of a stronger neighborhood vibe, sometimes more modest housing, and oftentimes a deeper sense of tradition or community. Now, the other wars you need to watch out for are the chili wars. So there's definitely Skyline versus Gold Star Chili. Now, Skyline Chili was founded in 1949 by Greek immigrant Nicholas Lambrinides on the west side in Price Hill. Gold Star Chili opened in 1965 by four brothers in Mount Washington on the east side. Now, the two restaurants are deeply iconic here in Cincinnati, and many locals align with one or the other based on family, neighborhood, or taste. Some other divides locally are going to be around sports teams, and that could include professional teams. You've got a lot of Reds fans here, a lot of Bengals fans here, but when it comes to rooting for universities, you might have fans of UC, University of Cincinnati. You might have Xavier fans. On the Kentucky side, you're certainly going to have University of Kentucky fans. You're going to have Louisville fans. A lot of people in Cincinnati also went to Ohio State, so you're going to have a lot of OSU fans here as well. So what should you do? Well, you're going to pick it up over time. You're going to pick up this east side versus west side. So embrace the quirks. Every city has them. We have ours here, right? Don't assume that all the stereotypes are going to be spot on or that people fit perfectly in buckets. We know that we're human beings and that just doesn't happen. But, use these traditions, use these quirks as ways to connect in with the locals, to kind of jump in and make social connections. All right, next up are some economic disparities, especially can be very stark in different neighborhoods. So if you're looking at a place like Indian Hill, for example, which is an ultra affluent area versus some of these, struggling inner city areas, there's going to be a wide gap between what you get in those two different pockets. The median household income in the village of Indian Hill, for example, is $228,000, and that's more than double the Cincinnati Metro's median of $79,490. Per capita income there is $149,000, and the median property value in Indian Hill is around $1.16 million. Now compare that to some of Cincinnati's inner city and high poverty neighborhoods. Overall in Cincinnati, around 24.5% of the population lives below the poverty line. And some zip codes with high Black populations have median household incomes far lower and housing values much lower. Suburbs like Westchester or Loveland tend to have moderate incomes, better housing, lower poverty rates compared to inner city areas. And in these middle class and wealthier suburbs like Indian Hill or Loveland or Mason or wherever, they're going to have higher property values, they're going to have larger lots, they're going to have more well-maintained roads, agencies, etc. While these poorer inner city regions often show more visible public infrastructure challenges. It's going to be more of an issue with the sidewalks, with potholes, with public safety concerns. So what does that mean for you when you're looking for a home? Well, you should compare neighborhood median incomes, property values, and poverty rates. Check out where the public investment is happening, whether that's road maintenance or parks, transit, and schools. Greater investment often is going to follow that economic strength. And also consider not just current economic indicators, but future growth trends. Which areas are seeing new development or revitalization? And if you are considering a move into one of these more affordable zones, investigate what support and community resources exist. There could be local nonprofits, public transport, and other resources to help offset disparity challenges. All right, now the last thing I want to talk about in terms of what you need to know if you're moving to Cincinnati are natural disasters. I often get questions around tornadoes. We're going to talk a little bit about tornadoes as well as flood risk with the Ohio River and other rivers nearby. First off, tornadoes, because a lot of people seem very scared about that. Number one, we have a lot of basements here, so you're protected from tornadoes if they do happen. Ohio averages around 21 tornadoes a year, and I know that sounds like a lot, but Ohio is a really big place, so practically what we feel here is a handful of tornado watches or warnings a year. Now let's talk about flood risk. Certain neighborhoods, especially low-lying ones, are at real flood risk. Floodplains, FEMA zones, past flood history, insurance costs, and resale risk all need to be considered. Now, definitely some areas are more prone to flood risk than others. For example, Sailor Park. About 27.5% of all properties in Sailor Park are projected to be at some flood risk over the next 30 years. That's around 454 properties in that one neighborhood alone. In some rankings, Sailor Park's flood risk is moderate. It's not high enough to be in mandatory FEMA high-risk zones for a 100-year flood. Now, FEMA maps are really going to be your friend here, and as a real estate agent, we can check this out really easily for you. FEMA maintains official flood maps that show which properties are in 100-year and 500-year flood zones. Now, these maps are publicly accessible via the FEMA Flood Map service, or like I said, you can reach out to us. Within the MLS here, both on the Kentucky and Ohio side, we can see really quickly whether the house you're looking at is in a flood zone. Now, there have been some pretty large historical floods here in the Cincinnati area. Now, the highest recorded flood on the Ohio River in Cincinnati was during the Ohio River flood of 1937, where river levels reached 79.9 feet. Cincinnati does have flood protection infrastructure in certain downtown riverfront areas, but these protections don't cover all flood-prone zones. So what does this mean for you? Look, if you're buying in a flood risk zone, first of all, always check the maps. You might need to budget for a higher flood insurance. You definitely want to check out the property history. Make sure you ask the seller, hey, what do you know? Have there been any floods here? What does that look like in the basement? That should always come to you in a property disclosure. And if they don't tell you that, they're committing fraud. So be sure to review all those documents before you purchase the house. And you might want to consider some extra waterproofing of your house, whether that be sump pumps or, like I said, French drains. There's different waterproofing systems that you can do to help protect your house for the long run. But here's the deal. Not all the neighborhoods here are at flood risk. That's the good news. And so if you're really concerned about this, just buy something that's not in the flood zone. There are a lot of hills here and a lot of elevation. Not everything is down in the river valley. So you have a lot of options here that aren't in the flood zone. I would say the majority of houses by far are not at risk for flood. Look, guys, Cincinnati is incredible. And I would say the pros definitely outweigh the cons. Otherwise, I wouldn't still be living here. I wouldn't be raising my 5 kids here because I think the city is actually amazing. But there is a lot to consider, right? You've got cost of living trade-offs with wages being lower. You've got these traffic issues. You've got the pollen in the springtime. You've got kind of divided neighborhoods and these wage gaps. You've got unpredictable weather, and you've got car dependence, and you've got crime issues to be aware of, and you've got potential flood risk. And there's a lot of things that could go wrong, and it's easy to land in the wrong spot if you don't plan ahead. And guys, that's what my team excels at. We've got over 100 5-star reviews on Google. We are helping families and professionals and relocating buyers move to the Cincinnati area every single week. This is what we specialize in. So if you're looking to move here, guys, call, text, email. Would love to connect with you and get that process started. If you're not quite ready yet, hit the QR code on the screen. We've got a free relocation guide to help you answer kind of all the topics we've talked about in this video and many, many more. Help you get to understand the neighborhoods, the school districts, the events that happen throughout the year. We put that together for you free of charge. Go check that out. Guys, if you made it this far into the video, I appreciate you. Make sure to hit that subscribe button to join the Sztanyo Clanyo. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.